The specimens had been sitting in museum collections for decades. In 2021, a research team extracted ancient DNA from 5 of them material drawn from fossil sites spanning both North and South America, ranging across tens of thousands of years of geological time. What the genomic sequencing returned was not a refinement of the existing record. It was a rupture. The animal those specimens represent has been known to paleontology since 1858, when the American naturalist Joseph Leidy formally described it from fossil material recovered in the Mississippi Valley. Anocyon formerly designated Canis dirus, a name that persisted in the scientific literature for 150 years, is one of the most extensively documented large carnivores in the Pleistocene record. Skeletal material has been recovered from hundreds of sites across 2 continents, spanning a temporal range from roughly 250,000 years before present to the final millennia of the epoch. The Rancho La Brea asphalt seeps in Los Angeles have yielded more than 4,000 individual specimens, the single largest assemblage of Pleistocene megafauna recovered anywhere on Earth. The youngest confirmed material, dated by standard radiometric methods, places the species' last known occurrence at approximately 9,500 years before present. No specimen has been recovered from deposits clearly post-dating that horizon. The species is classified as extinct. These are the accepted facts. What the study published by Perry and colleagues in Nature in 2021 established was a different kind of fact. The genomic analysis of those 5 specimens, drawn from fossil sites across the animal's full geographic and temporal range, showed that the Anocyon dirus lineage had diverged from the evolutionary branch that would produce modern wolves, coyotes, and domestic dogs approximately 5.7 million years ago, before the emergence of the genus Canis itself. This animal had been assigned to the same genus as the gray wolf for 150 years. Every behavioral inference, every ecological reconstruction, every extinction hypothesis developed in that period rested on that assignment. It was incorrect. The question is not whether the fossil record is extensive. The question is what, precisely, the extensive record was documenting. The implications extend beyond nomenclature. For as long as Anocyon dirus was classified as Canis dirus, its social structure, territorial range, hunting strategy, and prey preferences were populated by analogy with gray wolves, a species to which, as of 2021, it bears only distant evolutionary relationship. Gray wolves have been studied across multiple continents. Their pack dynamics, dispersal patterns, and prey selection are among the most documented behaviors in large carnivore biology. Paleontologists drew on that literature to build a behavioral model for the dire wolf. That model was not derived from evidence about Anocyon dirus. It was inherited from a misclassification. The 2021 paper did not simply transfer the animal to a new genus. It removed the behavioral foundation on which the species' extinction narrative had been constructed. There is a specific result from the genomic analysis that the existing literature has not resolved. Despite sharing territorial range with gray wolves across North America, for an estimated period exceeding 10,000 years competing for overlapping prey, moving through the same terrain across the same epoch, Anocyon dirus produced no detectable genetic exchange with any member of the genus Canis. Not across the 5 specimens sampled, not across the tens of thousands of years they represent. The standard explanations for such isolation in sympatric large predators involve reproductive incompatibility, partitioned ecological niches, or behavioral divergence sufficient to prevent contact. Each is plausible. None has been directly demonstrated for this species. The complete genetic isolation of a continental apex predator from its nearest evolutionary neighbors across 10 millennia of cohabitation is an anomaly the 2021 paper named, and that no subsequent study has explained. The case for a closed and reliable extinction record is not weak, and its force deserves a direct accounting. La Brea provides a nearly continuous depositional window spanning tens of thousands of years of occupation, dense, stratigraphically sequenced, independently dated across multiple collection events. Specimens recovered from sites in the American Southwest Florida, South America, and the Pacific coast converge on approximately the same extinction horizon. No specimen has been recovered from geological deposits clearly post-dating that boundary. For a Pleistocene species, this constitutes an unusually coherent body of evidence. The convergence across geographically independent sites gives the 9,500-year terminus an internal consistency that cannot be dismissed. What the record cannot account for is the geography it does not cover. North America at the close of the Pleistocene encompassed approximately 24 million square kilometers of habitat boreal forest, open grassland, mountain cordillera, semi-arid plateau, coastal lowland. The fossil record drawn from that range is not a census. It is a record of exceptional preservation events. Animals that died in asphalt seeps, in cave sediment accumulations, in permafrost. Each of those configurations represents a specific geological circumstance absent from most of the continent's terrain. Silty floodplain, forest floor, temperate grassland, the conditions that supported most Pleistocene ecosystems, do not preserve bone across geological time. They return organic material to the sediment cycle without record. The La Brea assemblage exists because a series of natural asphalt springs created an anomalous trapping and preservation environment across tens of thousands of years. That site covers an area measurable in hectares within a continent measurable in millions of square kilometers. The information density it provides for a single location in present-day Los Angeles does not extend to the interior boreal forests, the Pacific coastal ranges, or the semi-arid uplands east of the Rockies. A low-density specialized predator could have maintained a remnant range in any of those regions and generated no recoverable fossil signature. The record does not document that possibility. The record cannot. A continental wilderness of that scale does not simply fail to report what passes through it. It actively resists the conditions under which a record forms. The 9,500-year terminus is the date of the youngest specimen to have been preserved in conditions suitable for recovery and radiometric dating. That is a different thing from the last date the species lived. The geological record closed over Anocyon dirus the way deep sediment closes over everything it does not keep, not at a documented moment, but gradually, as the conditions that generate evidence fell away, and the organism, whatever remained of it, passed into terrain that does not hold what moves through it. A low-density apex predator distributed across millions of square kilometers of varied terrain, moving through habitat that does not preserve organic material. During a period for which the fossil record is geographically sparse, the absence of confirming evidence from such a sample is not a finding. It is a function of the sample's design. The behavioral profile that can be reconstructed for Anocyon dirus, independent of the gray wolf analogy, describes an animal of narrower and more specialized ecology. Its skeletal morphology diverges from gray wolves in documented ways. A heavier and more robust frame, with estimated body mass in large individuals approaching 68 kilograms. Limb bones of greater relative density, suggesting a build optimized for force over sustained pursuit. Dentition consistent with a hypercarnivore adapted to processing large-bodied, marrow-dense prey. These characteristics describe a specialist, an animal whose ecological foundation was anchored to prey that no longer exists. When the Pleistocene megafauna collapsed, the prey base that had sustained this specialization collapsed alongside it. That is the orthodox extinction narrative, and it is internally coherent. It is also built, in part, on behavioral inferences the 2021 study has left without evidential grounding. Whether Anocyon dirus maintained exclusive territorial ranges or overlapping home ranges, whether it was primarily diurnal or crepuscular or nocturnal, whether it hunted cooperatively or solitarily, these questions have not been answered from direct observation. They have been assumed from a genus assignment that no longer holds. Not enough, at present, to confirm any single behavioral reconstruction. Not enough to dismiss the degree to which the extinction narrative depends on one. If you've made it this far, subscribe. This channel covers the cases science hasn't closed. The answer to whether a record with the structural characteristics of the Anocyan-Dirus fossil record can be fundamentally incomplete is not theoretical. History has already provided the template. The Chacoan peccary, Catagonus wagneri, was known entirely from Pleistocene fossil material described from bones, classified as an extinction casualty of the same megafauna collapse that defines the dire wolf's terminal horizon. In 1975, a living population was discovered in the Gran Chaco, a remote semi-arid lowland spanning Paraguay, Argentina, and Bolivia terrain that had produced no fossil record and attracted no systematic paleontological survey. The species had not been absent from living ecosystems for 10,000 years. It had been absent from the record, in a region where the conditions that generate a record were absent. The woolly mammoth, Mammuthus primigenius, presents the problem at continental scale. Mainland North American populations collapsed approximately 10,000 years ago, a date that appeared in the literature as the species terminus until sediment cores from Rangel Island established that an isolated population survived until approximately 4,000 years before present a gap of 6,000 years between the accepted extinction date and the actual final occurrence, recovered not from any contemporary documentation but from physical evidence in terrain that had simply not been sampled. The coelacanth, Latimeria chalumnae, marks the outer boundary, a 65 million year gap between its last known fossil and its live recovery from the waters off South Africa in 1938. In each case, the resolution was identical. The youngest known specimen was not the youngest living individual. Each case, taken alone, demonstrates only that the pattern is possible. Taken together, they establish that the discrepancy between record closure and biological closure is a documented structural feature of the paleontological sample one that applies with particular force to large, specialized animals occupying terrain that generates sparse fossil records. Anocyan-Dirus occupied a continent as its sole evolutionary representative for millions of years. It shared that continent with gray wolves for 10,000 years and produced no genetic trace of the contact. It anchored its ecology to a prey base that ceased to exist, an animal that, by every structural indicator, maintained biological isolation through specialization and territorial depth, if any remnant population persisted beyond the documented record in habitat that does not preserve evidence. The record's silence is precisely what that persistence would look like. The absence of confirmation and the absence of the animal are not the same condition. Return to those 5 specimens in their collection drawers. The genomic sequences that dissolved a century and a half of accepted classification in a single published paper. The 2021 study produced the most detailed biological portrait of Anocyan-Dirus ever assembled. It did not determine when the animal's last individual died. It determined that the animal we thought we understood was not the animal we had been studying. The question is not whether the record that declared this species extinct is accurate about what it measured. The question is whether what it measured was the extinction or the boundary of the conditions under